What is up, LinkedIn podcast family? What is up, Sideline Sports family? This is your host with the most, coming at you from coast to coast with another episode of the LinkedIn podcast where we talk about everything Eagles, everything going on around the Eagles, everything that you guys need to know, keeping you guys linked. And my main man, Linc'd, will be here momentarily. We were experiencing some weird sound issues before the show. So he will be here in just a moment. But anyway, guys, I got to say, I have been taking a little bit of a vacation from doing YouTube and doing all the videos and stuff. But the LinkedIn podcast, the Gauntlet podcast, they got to keep going. Sideline Sports Network, got to keep it going. So we already got Angel in the house. What is up, Angel? Thank you for being the first commenter of the night. We have a lot of exciting things to go over for the show tonight, and I can't wait. I'm very excited about it. So, first things first, we got our Philadelphia Eagle of the week. Mr. Patrick Robinson is the guy that we are going to be going over for this week, ladies and gentlemen. So, when you look at Patrick Robinson, his career as a Philadelphia Eagle was very brief. In fact, he was only here for one season. He was only here for that 2017 title run. And I got to say, the biggest thing that stands out for him is obviously this moment right here. The pick six. The play that turned the tide of the NFC Championship back in 2017 against the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota was basically driving down the field. They had already scored on the opening possession, where Case Keenum was very surgical. He found Kyle Rudolph for the opening touchdown, and then the Vikings took a 7-0 lead. And they were looking to go up 14-0, and then Patrick Robinson intercepts the pass from Case Keenum, takes it back all the other way for a pick six, and it was over from there. You know, the Minnesota Vikings did not even score or do anything the entire rest of the game. You know, it was insane. And, you know, that was a big difference between going down 14-0 and Minnesota having a lot of big momentum at the moment of the game. Instead, Patrick Robinson picks it off. And the thing that sticks out to me in that play, which I don't think everyone quite remembers it, because everything is about Patrick taking the ball and scoring the other way, but you got to give it up to Chris Long. Because on this play, in particular, I remember Chris Long, he almost had a strip sack on this play, because what happened was he got to Case Keenum and he hit his arm just a little bit, and it affected the throw. And then obviously he went up and got the intercept, and then Patrick got up and got the interception, took the other way. But Patrick Robinson was a very important piece for us for that Super Bowl championship run in 2017. And also, don't forget that during the regular season, he also led the team in interceptions. He had 4 interceptions that season. He had 18 pass breakups in the games that he started. And as a slot corner, he was very, very good. And you could argue that, was Patrick our best corner for that season? I think so. And it might not be saying much, because you had Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby as your top starting corners. You had Russell Douglas, who was filling in when Ronald Darby was hurt. But secondary definitely wasn't great. But Patrick Robinson, he was one of those very underrated signings that we made that contributed a major piece to the team. You know, you also had Timmy Jernigan, that was a major part, trading from the Baltimore Ravens. You also had Chris Long that was coming over. He had just won a Super Bowl with New England, and then we went on to beat New England in the Super Bowl. So Chris Long got his back-to-back Super Bowls. Obviously, LeGarrette Blount was a huge one, trading for Jay Ajayi. It was just a great season. It was a great story, and Patrick Robinson taking that pick six back is definitely going to be a moment that no Eagles fan is going to forget anytime soon. So that's really cool stuff there. But as we're still waiting for Linc'd to get in the house, we are going to take a short commercial break. And when we get back, we're going to discuss Baker Mayfield to the Carolina Panthers. How does it affect the Philadelphia Eagles? Does it affect us at all? That is something that we are going to have to keep our eyes on as we are going through this upcoming NFL season. So we'll be right back, guys, after the break.
I'm running like my hands on fire, and I don't intend to stop even when my legs grow tired. And I got a message, Colorado straight from Texas, captured most of me, just let me be.
And guys, make sure that you guys check out Yeti coolers. It's the best time of year to get a Yeti cooler, Yeti cups. I actually seen a video this week, and Lindy Legend is in the house now, ladies and gentlemen. So, as I was saying, I seen a video this week of it was somebody's truck that had caught on fire, and then the Yeti cup, as Lindy's showing you right now, the Yeti cup survived it. Like, it still had the water, the ice, everything was like intact. The truck was literally in an explosion. It was crazy. So definitely check out Yeti products. But Lindy, before we move on to go to the Baker Mayfield talk, just wanted to say, obviously Patrick Robinson was kind of a one-year wonder for the Eagles, only here for one season, but he did leave his mark to make an impact on the team, winning the Super Bowl. So what was your thoughts when you were seeing what Patrick Robinson was able to bring to the Eagles during that 2017 championship run?
Right. I mean, in terms of making sure I don't have an echo here. I think it's gone now. But in terms of what Patrick Robinson meant to Philly, he wasn't the splashiest player in terms of free agency and what he brought to the team. But it's not that he wasn't terrible either. And if you go back into history on, who he was as a player and, a former first round pick back in 2010, spent his first 5 years with the New Orleans Saints, you can arguably say that, he underachieved. You could arguably say that he underachieved a little bit, wasn't selected to any Pro Bowls or, all team first or second pros. And, under the criteria of a first round pick, you can say underachiever, I guess, in a sense. But from the Eagles' perspective, coming into this as a journeyman around 29 years old and, visiting
Malcolm Jenkins was first.
So him visiting the Eagles as a journeyman and paying visits to the Chargers and the Colts first before showing up here, him being the third DB on the depth chart, as kind of a quasi outside corner that can go into the slot at times, he did still have a significant role on this team. He played 69% of the snaps. So, it's not like that. It's not like that he was just a filler on the, on the Eagles that year. He actually contributed, I think, more than people expected. He had quite a few nice tackles. He had a couple of interceptions. He was just always around the football. He had a great game against the Cards. He was aggressive against the Broncos, the Cowboys, and as we know, in the NFC Championship game against the Vikings. At the cornerback spot where we just didn't feel like we had a lot of depth going in, with Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby and guys slowly coming into their own. Rasul Douglas was a part of that, second string with Patrick Robinson. He came in right place at the right time, and that's, the best way to describe him for the Eagles in 2017.
Absolutely, man. And like I said before we went to commercial break, nobody in the Eagles fan base is ever going to forget this moment right here when Patrick took the pick six back against the Minnesota Vikings.
Right.
One of the best moments in Eagles history. And we got Captain Raphael in the house. What's up, Raphael? Thank you guys for tuning in to the show. What is going on, Awesomeness Sports? Thank you guys once again for showing up and showing support during the LinkedIn podcast. So, guys, now we're going to move on to some current NFL news. We saw Baker Mayfield, formerly quarterback of the Cleveland Browns, the former number 1 overall pick, in fact, Heisman winner at Oklahoma, all the good stuff, got traded to the Carolina Panthers for a conditional 5th-round pick. So they did not get a whole lot in return back from the trade, did the Browns. But Baker gets his new chance to go play and go do his thing, Lindy. So in terms of how this trade could affect the Philadelphia Eagles, what are your thoughts on Baker to the Panthers?
Who would have thought that 2 top 5 picks would have been on the same team in the same draft class? Well. Right. Who would have thought? But no,
I'm not talking sports. I'm talking anime, Reaper.
It's crazy from it's crazy from a perspective of, the Browns have been struggling for how many years on end to try and find a franchise guy at the position. And you go into this situation where they have replaced him with Deshaun Watson, and for wrong reasons, and giving him all that guaranteed money. Now he's expected to be the franchise quarterback of the Cleveland Browns, moving on from Baker. And it's crazy to see where Baker is in his career right now after spending his entire rookie campaign and so on with Cleveland, already at 27 years old, and now he's on his second football team. So, and aside from that, you look at him and Sam Darnold, two quarterbacks in the NFL since 2018 that have thrown the most interceptions, and you can arguably say that, despite the Browns being the Browns, regardless, with the talent around him, Baker should have had a lot more success than he did. When you consider him having guys like Nick Chubb, and then Kareem Hunt gets into the mix, they go for Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, the list goes on. And then you look how loaded the tight end position was at one point. Nasty defenses, a great secondary, Myles Garrett along that defensive line. They took a chance on Malik Jackson when the Eagles dumped him. I mean, some of those Browns teams were pretty loaded from top to bottom, and the most Baker was able to do was to get one playoff win against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, now he goes into a situation where, granted, the Panthers roster-wise isn't that terrible to me, going through who they have on the depth chart. To me, I think the Panthers have a lot to be desired, most so on the defensive line. In the secondary, they still got guys like they still have J.C. Horn. Jeremy Chin is back there at safety. Their depth at linebacker is still decent. Offensively, they got a slew of receivers, whether it's Terrence Marshall Jr., Robbie Anderson is still there. They just got Andre Roberts, and the one outlier right now is Christian McCaffrey, because he just can't stay on the field. Otherwise, he's one of the
Don't forget
biggest
DJ Moore.
threats. DJ Moore, yeah. So, you look at Christian McCaffrey, and he's still one of the biggest threats from the running back position of all the football, but that's only when he's on the football field and can actually stay healthy. So when I put that all together, and the current dysfunction that they have in terms of the quarterback position and what they should do going forward, whether it's Baker or Sam Darnold, you would think it's Baker from a success standpoint. But statistically, those two quarterbacks aren't that far apart. But I think intangibly, Baker could potentially be a little more of a better leader than Sam, because Sam just doesn't have that kind of backbone to me.
Yeah.
For as we know, Baker is a lot more vocal, more so negatively than positive, but he still has a voice. But nonetheless, the bigger picture is, the Eagles have made a transaction in order to acquire more picks in this year's draft class when they made the transaction with the Saints, and when you look at the division as a whole, I don't believe the Panthers are going to be all that competitive. Aside from them maybe
No, I
fighting
don't
for
either.
third, I mean, they're going to fight for third in that division with the Atlanta Falcons, and the Falcons have their own problems to sort through, with the quarterback position, and if Marcus
I
Mariota
believe
is
the
going to be
Panthers
the
also
answer.
have Matt Corral, who they drafted in the third round. And then they have PJ
they all
Walker, who was at the Houston
absolutely
Roughnecks in the XFL. But still, their
right.
quarterback position is Baker doesn't really make it that much better.
No, they don't. And when you consider that the Saints have gotten better, and them adding Jarvis Landry to the mix of receivers, they have Tyrann Mathieu now at safety to replace Marcus Williams, and Michael Thomas is still there. And well, aside from waiting on the possible suspension to Alvin Kamara, nonetheless, offensively they're still loaded. Defensively, they're still loaded since they replaced Marcus Williams. So it's not like they're really going anywhere so long as Jameis Winston decides to improve from his days in Tampa and slinging the football all over the place, and
30 interceptions.
not really caring. Yeah, I was going to say, not really caring about throwing interceptions. If he can take care of the football a little bit better, then he can prove to be more valuable at that position. And then you look at the Buccaneers; they're still going to be a powerhouse in the NFC conference. So it's not like they're going to fall down the positional race in the NFC South. So, I mean, at best, the Panthers are going to be fighting for third, and well, that's good for us because we're awaiting on what our first round pick from them is going to be in next year's class.
Yeah, and as you said in regards to Jameis, when his career is over, ESPN has 30 for 30s, where the documentaries are going to be a documentary about Jameis, and it's literally going to be called 30 for 30 because he went 30 for 30 a few seasons ago, and he threw 30 touchdowns, and he threw 30 interceptions. I mean, it was pretty disgraceful. But as far as my opinions about this move for the Panthers, when you look at it, does it make their quarterback position that much better? I'm going to go to Raper's comment because I absolutely agree with what he said. I don't think that it makes that much of a difference for the Panthers. I mean, it makes a difference for Baker because I think Baker actually has a chance to really start on his team where he probably wasn't going to do that. Even if Deshaun got suspended, he probably wasn't going to want to help the Browns. But for a fifth-round pick that the Panthers gave up, is it a terrible move? No, absolutely not. I mean, it's probably better than what you have. But the problem with the Carolina Panthers is, and not even just the Panthers, this is not even just a knock on just the Panthers, but a lot of the organizations in the NFL. In fact, the majority of the organizations in the NFL are not well-run organizations. There's 5 to 7 or 8 really well-run organizations, and then the other teams just don't know what they're doing. That's why last season you saw the Panthers go out and trade for Sam Darnold, who, as you mentioned, is from the same draft class as Baker. But what's the difference between these two is that the Browns are paying for most of Baker's salary, which was supposed to be pretty high for this year, but the Panthers are only going to be paying for $4 million. And then Sam Darnold is under for $18 million this season. So let's say that they go into camp and Baker wins the job, which I think a lot of people seem to think that's the direction the Panthers are going in. Yep. Well, you're paying a guy $18 million that was literally seeing ghosts and stuff, and he's going to be sitting on the bench doing nothing, and you're paying him almost $20 million. It's kind of like, what are you guys doing here? As far as the Panthers, yes, I think that they have some talent, but the Panthers are a type of team that no matter what happens, you cannot really rely on them because they're always going to find a way to mess up their own stuff. Obviously last season they started off 3-0 and then they were trash. The Panthers just get in their own way. So I do not think that the Panthers are any kind of a threat in the division. I think that the only way that this can affect us is if the Saints get in their own way. The Saints have done that in the past. I mean, when they had Drew Brees and Sean Payton, they went to 7-9 for 3 straight years, despite having a very talented team. So is it possible that the Saints can still get in their own way? Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
But Baker, I don't think it moves the needle for the Panthers whatsoever. I think that he's just slightly less terrible than someone like Sam Darnold and someone like Matt Corral, who's a third-round rookie from Ole Miss that's not ready to play. So I don't think it's going to have very much of an effect on us whatsoever. The Saints, it would be nice if they had a bad season and we got a top pick, but I think realistically, expectations, the Saints, if they're contending for a playoff spot, or maybe they'll be right outside the playoffs, we'll get like a pick in the teens. And that's okay, because we had a couple of picks in the teens this past year, and it turned out pretty well for us. We moved up and we got Jordan Davis, and we traded for A.J. Brown, and we came out pretty good in the first round. So as far as all of that's concerned, I don't really think Baker is going to affect the team that much for the Panthers, and I don't really think it's something that, Eagles fans should be saying, oh, watch out for the Panthers now because they're going to help us get a better draft pick. I just don't see it happen.
I mean, there may be a bigger positive note out of this if Baker ends up becoming a starter, but as far as I'm concerned, there's 2 more problems that I'm thinking about in terms of Carolina and what they did here. Number one, they gave up more to get Sam Darnold than they did Baker Mayfield. Now, you can easily say in that perspective that, oh, okay, well, this probably wouldn't have been the same situation if this was pre-injury before Baker had gone through the torn labrum, with his shoulder and all that. So I think at face value, if you got a healthy Baker Mayfield instead of, one coming off of a negative season in which he's still rehabilitating an injury, then, you're probably going to have to spend more than a conditional 5th. But right now, at face value, the Panthers have spent more on Sam Darnold than they did Baker. So that doesn't look all very good. Number 2, you can also arguably say that, from a team-to-team basis, Baker, I think, benefited a lot from having a very good defense in Cleveland that was as consistent as they were. And as we know how valuable a defense is to a team, to which, well, it gives your quarterback some breathing room that, the defense can prevent the other team from scoring, so you can start to build a comfortable lead, and your offense doesn't have to be out there as much in terms of the first string if you're just blowing the doors off of somebody. So being that that's not necessarily going to be the case in Carolina, since really they have nothing to boast about defensively other than having a good secondary. Yeah, I think I think Baker is going to be he's going to be above a hotter fire this time than he was in Cleveland. Being the team is right, yeah. So being the team is more lopsided from a talent standpoint than the Browns were, I think he's going to have a more difficult time in trying to elevate the team to winning football games.
And Baker's not really a guy that can elevate players. He's a guy that needs players to elevate him. So he's not obviously Mahomes. He's not Josh Allen. He's not Lamar or Joe Burrow or Herbert. He's not on the level. He's a guy that if you have a solid team around him, you can put him in and he can win you a few games. They're not going to win the games because of him. They're going to win the games because they have pieces around him. So it depends on what the pieces are going to do around Baker Mayfield. One of the areas the Panthers were struggling last season was their offensive line. It was a terrible offensive line. They drafted offensive line in the first round this year. They have weapons. They have skill players. Christian McCaffrey, as we've said with Miles Sanders, he's very talented, but he cannot stay healthy. So for Baker to have the success that he had with Cleveland, why did he have it? Because he had Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt and having a really great running game around him. So that is my thoughts and opinions about the whole Baker situation. And as I said, I do not think it is going to be affecting us that much. And we do have,
unfortunately,
Philly Mike in the house. And I'm actually glad that he said that, because our next topic of conversation, Mike, is actually going to be about Mr. JJ the Enforcer Whiteside. Is the saga coming to an end with the Philadelphia Eagles after he was drafted in the second round? Needless to say, he has not been able to do very much with his playing on the field. I mean, he barely even gets to play because he's just simply not a good player. And he, I mean, I'm not even trying to be.
So,
I'm not even trying to be just
before you continue, Jim. Before you continue, I have made my point at least twice now between a video and actually being in the Goat Talk podcast call-in with Philly Mike.
With the JJ talk, where are we standing?
I've already made my point a couple of times, so I was going to say I want to hear what you have to think first in terms of him at tight end.
I feel that at first I thought it was an interesting move to see him move into another position, because I'm saying, okay, there's not really a lot of people that's here that's going to be competing for the second spot. I mean, you have Jack Stahl, and you have Tyree Jackson, and you have Grant Calcaterra, and you have JJ. So realistically, who's going to take that spot? It seems to be kind of wide open. But at the same time, you're talking about a guy that's been good at blocking. You know, he's been a good blocking receiver. That's the one thing he's actually good at. He cannot catch.
That's half of it.
He cannot do anything. So at least he can push people out of the way. But you're not going to be always pushing, you know, a guy that's, you know, under
linebackers
pounds,
and edge
like
rushers.
170-pound corner, 180-pound corner. You're not going to be doing that all the time. So now you're going to have to actually push, you know, some defensive linemen. You're going to have to push some linebackers, some pretty big, strong, and physical guys. Are you going to be able to do that consistently? I do not actually think that he's going to be able to do that week in, week out, every single week. So if I know who's going to actually take that second spot? I don't. But I feel very, very confident saying that I do not believe it is going to be JJ. I think JJ is done. I think he will be cut from the team, and somebody else will be taking over for the second tight end spot. And hopefully Eagles fans will be able to forget that this JJ saga happened in the first place. That is my opinion.
Umbrella Man.
I'm done. Like I'm done with Mr. Umbrella Man. I'm done with JJ the horse teeth Whiteside. So I hope that he can enjoy himself and go to a new rodeo, because the rodeo is not going to be in Philadelphia. But go ahead, Lindy.
Right. No, I've made this point at least a couple of times now, because I'm trying to, I may be reaching in the, in the depths of the core of the earth here, but as much. As much as we try, as much as some people try to keep Jalen Reagor relevant and maybe getting the fourth wide receiver role, even though he's in more of an uphill battle than I think Arcega-Whiteside is when we're talking about the tight end position. Him moving to tight end is more of a benefit than it is a negative, because of, a couple of reasons. Number one, I alluded to this in a video that I made a couple of days ago, and talking to Goat Talk about it between Philly Mike and Lord Brunson. I said, I reminded them in a little hint that, dating back to the Super Bowl year, the Eagles kept 3 tight ends on their roster. And between Zach Ertz and Brent Selleck, who was that third tight end that ended up throwing the pass to Nick Foles on the Philly special in the Super Bowl? That was one Trey Burton. Trey at that time and right now, Arcega-Whiteside are the same build. They're 6'2", about 240 pounds. And as we remember, Trey Burton was basically an extra receiver on the field when they wanted to mix in some 11 personnel package. If they wanted him as the feature tight end, if Selleck and Ertz were not on the field, or if they wanted to go 12 and mix it up and have a bigger body with a smaller body, then those were the cases where we seen Trey Burton, especially, and there it is. I can't finish now because you're creating a comedic distraction. Well, we have to bring some humor here. No, I'm playing though, but the point that I'm getting at is Trey Burton was an undrafted rookie free agent back in 2014 of the Florida Gators. And, people can remember on how we tried to hype up Trevon Grimes when he was here. That receiver that everybody wanted to give a chance, and they're like, oh, he was the teammate to Kyle Pitts, and he had all this yardage for the Gators, and yada yada. And Brian Johnson was he was the offensive coordinator over there, and for as much as we were trying to push him, well, I mean, in the aspect of Arcega-Whiteside moving to tight end, he has a bigger window of opportunity to me than Rager does. And for the reason being that, well, the Eagles have been known to keep 3 tight ends on their roster. Now, I'm not advocating for J-Jaw to try and go for the number 2 spot because I think that's completely impossible. But it wouldn't hurt to throw him out there at the number 3. For instance, if a guy like Grant Calcaterra ends up not being ready, depending if Tyree Jackson comes back soon from injury or not, Noah Togiai is still there. But being from an experience standpoint, when you look at where Jack Stoll has been so far and really embracing the role at tight end 2, we have seen him over the course of a few games improving himself as a pass catcher when he was primarily known as a blocker coming out of Nebraska. So when you look at it that way, there's a lot of cards stacked against Arcega-Whiteside like there is with Jalen Rager. But when you make the comparison between him and Trey Burton, you have to think to yourself, well, if an undrafted free agent can do what he did in accelerating his role outside of the Eagles, because when he left the Eagles in 2017 and went to the Chicago Bears, he had only 31 targets as the number 3 tight end for the Eagles in the Super Bowl run, and he takes a more elevated role in Chicago, and he ends up getting almost 70 targets with a pretty good catch percentage of around 75%. So he ended up contributing even more for the Bears than he did for the Eagles that year because we were stacked at the tight end spot. So where does that leave a guy like Arcega-Whiteside? Well, I mean, he already, we thought he had the skill set coming out of Stanford as a second-round pick, as, a 50-50 jump ball, red zone type of receiver. So if he has any kind of saving grace in that regard when he gets moved to tight end, that would be it, since he's already working on his blocking. Again, he's going to have to work against linebackers and defensive ends more on a regular basis if he's put out there in 12 personnel. But, well, in terms of a more receiving type of tight end than a blocking tight end, his biggest competition in that regard is going to end up being Grant Calcaterra, because I don't know where a guy like Tyree Jackson is going to be in his recovery process from a torn ACL. Otherwise, you're not going to steer away from having a 6'7" tight end on the football field. I mean, that's already attractive in itself to have a guy that freaking tall, reminding us of like Harold Carmichael back in the day with his 6'8" self. But yeah, I mean, I went out on the thinnest hair follicle limb that you possibly could with Arcega-Whiteside, but I tried to create as much of a legitimate saving grace as possible.
He's only listed at 225. Jack Stoll is like 247. I think.
Who, Arcega-Whiteside?
Arcega-Whiteside's 225.
No, he bulked up to 237. He's closer to 240
I haven't seen anything about that, but I don't think that he has the build or the strength to be a tight end, because in the tight end position, one of the things that we're always saying for someone like Zach Ertz was he was catching the ball and falling down, and that was pretty much it. He wasn't able to break any tackles.
All right, but neither did Trey Burton, and I said, Trey was the number 3.
My point being is, if you cannot break tackles and you cannot block and you cannot catch, the one thing that Zach was able to do was he was able to run routes and catch. So you couldn't say that he wasn't doing anything. But he couldn't block and he couldn't break tackles. So Arcega-Whiteside, you have to question with his size. Can he break tackles? can he block, and can he catch?
Yeah.
And right now, based on what we know, I don't think he can do all three. So, yeah, I don't know what role there is for him on the team. I cannot see in it.
Right. I mean, yeah, like I said, worst case scenario, obviously. Or if you want to take a best case scenario, if you just don't want him on the damn team anymore, much like Jalen Reagor. Yeah, yeah, right. So I think Reagor and Whiteside are in the trash bin right now as far as most of the Eagles fandom is concerned. That's where they're basically putting them. But like I said, I think that is really the only saving grace a player like Arcega-Whiteside could do for himself. This is from a personal standpoint of him as a player. This isn't, this is me trying to analyze what he had and what he had coming out of college at Stanford that he hasn't used.
Monster preseason. That's the only way I can see it.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I completely understand people not having any faith whatsoever because it's up to the player to prove what they do or don't have after being drafted. But if I had to create a comparison on what he could possibly do, I see him being compared to Trey Burton and how he was able to contribute in 2017, being that their builds are the same. And coming out of college, Arcega-Whiteside was more talented, just from a perspective of actually being drafted where Trey Burton wasn't.
I hear you on that. So we are pretty much expecting JJ to not make the team. If he does, I think it'll be Christmas miracle. Christmas, I mean, it is July, so maybe Christmas in July, training camp in July, Christmas in July. Maybe it's going to be a Christmas miracle. You never know. But I feel like that's not going to happen. But last week we were discussing Miles Sanders, and I was obviously very frustrated about the comments of, we're an all-star team, we're this, we're that, we're going to be, really good, we're going to do all this stuff when you haven't proven anything. That's what I said about Miles. I said, if it was another player that proven something, then maybe I would not have this much of a problem. But Miles, you got to be rushing over 1,000 yards this season. That's what I think Miles needs to do for himself to get paid a salary that he wants to be paid. I do not think it will be from us, but it might be from another team. You have to prove that you can be a top running back in the league, which he has not done yet, but yet he's talking. So A.J. Brown responded and said, with all due respect to Miles, I know he's very excited for the season, like we all are excited for the season, but we have not proven anything. We are, a bunch of guys, and we made moves, and there's been all these, people writing articles and saying the Eagles are one of the most improved teams in the league. And you know what? I think they are one of the most improved teams in the league. I think the moves that we made have kind of shows that. But at the end of the day, this game is not for playing on paper. This game is about what you're doing on the field and how you can produce with the players that you have. So the players that we brought in, it's been amazing, but we got to see them play and produce and do it every single week so we can make the playoffs and do some real damage. So I like what A.J. Brown's doing. It is his first year being on the team, and he is, he's not really he's been in the league for a few years, but he's not really like a 10-year veteran or anything. He's still a relatively young guy, but he's one of the main pieces on our team going forward on that 5-year contract. So seeing him come in into and kind of having a little bit of a leadership role and trying to make his voice be heard to people like Miles that's been around here for a long time. He's not afraid to speak up and speak his mind. And I think that's really good for the team when you're transparent and you have everyone on the same page. You have Miles out here doing what he's saying, bringing a lot of attention to the team. And then we got to kind of say, hey, Miles, we get what you're doing. Excited for the season, excited for, all the good players that we brought into the team, but you got to calm down, bro. We got to go out into the season, week 1 against the Detroit Lions, and we got to go from there and keep trying to be 1-0 every week. And if we do that, then we'll be where we're supposed to be at the end of the season. But as far as saying, all this stuff, it's not good. And I think AJ, I got to give all the respect to AJ for coming in, being a new player, and not being afraid to speak his mind. I think it was awesome to see.
Right, and he's only a new player from a team standpoint, so he has already established a rapport in the
Right, but my point
NFL
was like
in
he's
the
not
NFL in
really.
general.
My point was that he hasn't really been around this group of guys for as
No, no,
long as
yeah,
of our other guys, but he's not afraid to still say, "Hey, this ain't it," which I really
yeah,
respect.
no, I completely get where you're coming from, and there's nothing wrong with him taking that approach already. Like he's already establishing himself and wanting to be an alpha on this football team, and that's no slight to guys like Devontae Smith, who is with like the disciplinary attitude that he built over the years at Alabama, and how strict and how strict and directive a guy in Nick Saban runs that football program. That's it's a
Very
good
strict.
mindset to be built into. We have three of those guys on our roster right now, between Hurts, Landon Dickerson, and Devontae Smith. And then you add a seasoned NFL player into the mix, and AJ Brown, who can just take that up to another notch, another level, and teach these kids, quote unquote, because they're still young as professional NFL football players. He can bring these guys along and teach them what it's like to have a sense of professionalism, and him taking the first steps and applying himself as one of those alphas on the football team is absolutely the position you want to be in if you're a head coach, because you want those guys to step up. You want those guys to elevate their voice, to be a strong presence in the locker room. And that's not to say that we haven't had that all this time, but we are just looking for it in other areas, especially at the wide receiver position. And in terms of Miles, this is another thing that it's another thing that I talked about on the call-in. And to Miles' defense, and where and how he came up on this football team, and after being drafted with his rookie year coming in 2019, and unfortunately his rookie season was his best season so far, and I think that's easily arguable, due to his track record and not being able to stay healthy and play more than 12, 13 games consecutively. But he came in 19, and he's kind of watching the team going in a downhill type of
Absolutely.
slump. And there's a buildup of frustration there, because I do believe that he has a winning mentality. Like, his mindset is of what we commend Jalen Hurts for, and he wants to be a winner, and he wants to do what's necessary in order to put him in those positions to succeed as a contributing player on offense or the football team in general. And I think that built up frustration turned into overwhelming excitement when you see all the moves that the front office
It's
is
all based
making,
on emotion.
and putting these star-studded players around you. And while some of them aren't, flashy and all-pro type of people, aside from Hassan Reddick and AJ Brown being a Pro Bowler, you're adding depth where it's necessarily needed. And he's looking at it across the board, that offensively and defensively, there isn't as many holes as what he has witnessed the last few years trying to make a name for himself on this football team. And
No,
now,
there's no excuse for him to do.
right. So now it's like, it's like the feeling of, like, when you're in a poker game and you feel that you have a hand that nobody else can beat without seeing the other people's hands. Then, well, you kind of get carried away with yourself. You're going to try and bluff others. And then, AJ Brown is there to kind of slow him down, so stuff like this doesn't, blow back up in his face. And that's what's ultimately happening here.
That's
But
a good teammate right there.
but from a performance standpoint, that's where everybody's going to automatically resort to, because again, it's obvious what Miles has to do. And he can sit there and say, about opportunities all he wants. You have to earn those opportunities in the first place. So it's
team hasn't been able to trust him.
So yeah, his complaining in that regard is not entirely warranted, because you have to build trust on a consistent basis to want the offensive coordinator and want the play caller to say,
He hasn't
okay,
shown
Hurts,
he can be a guy that can take like 20 carries every single game. He hasn't shown that yet. So
yes. And as much as we want to boast about him averaging 5 yards a carry and yada yada, he didn't have a single touchdown last year as a running back. That's a problem, especially when your quarterback is taking all the carries, because in a sense, Hurts might not even trust his own running back.
Kenneth Gainwell was getting all those touchdowns because Kenneth Gainwell he's got really good hands, and Miles does not have good hands. And it's crazy because when Miles was coming in, you mentioned that Miles was coming in, he had 500 yards in his receiving. He was a good receiver in his first season, and ever since then he's been terrible. I just don't know how that can happen.
And this is the more perplexing part, because they were using Kenny in more red zone packages than Miles, and Kenny's a smaller player. Where's the sense in that outside of using a stockier Boston Scott?
If Kenny put on 10,
you just don't get
pounds, it. I think he could be like the number one back on the team if he put on a little bit of weight.
Sure,
if he got bigger and stockier, hell yeah.
I mean, yeah, he has that capability. I mean, look at Antonio Gibson. He was, you got two products coming out of Memphis, and how like him, Tony Pollard, Antonio Gibson. Then you got Kenny Gainwell. So, granted, they weren't all I don't think they were all selected at the same point, at the same point in their draft classes. But, the potential is definitely there. And for everything in terms of Miles, of being selected at the same spot in his draft class as Shady McCoy, and being from the Pittsburgh, there were so many connections to LaShawn McCoy, and it just ended up being, well, yeah. Are we even getting a dollar store version of Shady? I don't even think it's close. But it's a shame at the same time, because Miles shares a quality that Saquon Barkley does. Well, coincidentally, being teammates from Penn State. But the thing that Saquon and Miles share is that they are home runs waiting to happen, because of how many 60, 70, or 50 plus yard runs that Miles has already in his career.
If you're going to try to always hit the home runs, it doesn't always happen. You have to take sometimes the defense gives you. You're not always going to have 70 yards. Yeah. You need to get and there's a hole and you can get a 5 yards. That's what you need to do.
Yes, and that's a part of Miles' problem, because he's not picking the correct lanes and the correct holes that the offensive line is giving him for a given play, and he decides to do something else. So I think there's a confusion there, because people like to say that he dances a lot. Well, it's not so much that it is dancing, when it's more making the wrong decision to the direction that you're supposed to go based on what the play call is. So that's that's more of a sense of just following direction, and the structure of the play call more so dancing in the backfield, because I think that's the next tier of what stems off of the undecisiveness.
Absolutely. So pretty much we got to wrap the segment up just before we get to the end of the show here. But bottom line, Miles he did speak out, and it was kind of stupid. Good to see you got A.J. Brown being a good teammate, even though it's his first year with the team. It was awesome to see. Obviously if someone like Fletcher Cox or Brandon Graham or someone else had said this, it would have been good, obviously, but these guys have been on the team for a decade plus now. You got a guy that's first coming in, and he's trying to show and contribute being a leader on the field with his play and also off the field. So I respect it, and I love to see it. So our next topic of the show and our last topic of the show is going to be about the quarterback, Mr. Jalen Hurts. Extension talk, money talk. What does Jalen Hurts have to do, in your guys' opinion, to become a quarterback that's getting paid the big dollars, the big money? Because obviously we've seen it everywhere in sports. Even in the NBA, you have freaking Zion Williamson that's barely playing, and he's getting like $200 million. It's absolutely crazy. So money has become crazy in sports. It's been crazy for the quarterbacks. You have quarterbacks getting paid an absurd amount of money. But the point is, Jalen Hurts is coming into his second season, third season overall, but second season as a starting quarterback of the team. He's got command of the team. He's got the respect of the team. And it's all about how he progresses and shows that he can be a good player. So for him to get paid a big extension, obviously people are going to bring up stats. Oh, he has to do this, 4,000 yards, 5,000 yards, whatever amount of passing yards, rushing yards, touchdowns, whatever. People are always going to talk about that. But for me, I do not care about the stats. If he plays and gets better, then obviously his stats will be better as a direct result of that. But he has to make the wise decisions. He has to not be turning the ball over. He has to be reading the field and seeing if Devontae Smith is wide open, you got to get this man the ball. He's a playmaker. He's a stud. A.J. Brown, he's a playmaker. He's a stud. Dallas Goedert is a stud. You have a lot of good players that you can get the ball to, and they will do a lot of damage to the opposing defense. So make the right decisions. Do what you're supposed to do. You don't have to do stuff being crazy. You don't have to be somebody that you're not. I think that Jalen can be very good. Do I think he's going to be as good as Patrick Mahomes or Burrow or Josh Allen or someone like that? Unfortunately, I do not. But I still think he can be very good. I still think we can win a lot of games with Jalen as the quarterback. But he has to do what he's supposed to do. He has to be smart, play smart, and not force it and not try to be something that he's not. And I hope that the coaches, Nick Sirianni, Shane Steichen, Brian Johnson, all the coaches that's working directly with Jalen in the offense is not trying to force him to be what he's not. If they're going to try to force him being a pocket passer, obviously we want to be seeing him become better as a passer. Want to see him getting the ball to these guys, as I mentioned, and not, taking off and running as much. But you got to understand he is a very athletic quarterback. And this athleticism brings another level to the offense that a lot of offenses do not have. So I don't think they should completely take him out of using his legs. I think he should still use his legs, but he needs to not, rely completely on his legs. Make the right decisions. Try to look to pass down the field if there's nothing open. Do not force it. Use your athletic ability because you know that you have it. That was my thoughts on Jalen Hurts. Do what you're supposed to do. Everything will work out. If he has a great season and he proves that he can lead this team further and further, then I believe he will get signed to an extension. But I do not think the Eagles are going to be rushing to, pay him a lot of money. Just my opinion.
Yeah, right. And of course you can't take it from a pure statistical standpoint, because it's about how he got, how and when he got those stats, and that's purely defined by his efficiency as a quarterback. So when you look into him from an evaluation standpoint, you have to take it as, well, what was his efficiency on first down? What were the majority of the play calls? Did he decide to run on this play when he should have stayed in structure? How many reads does he go through before he throws the ball away and pretty much calls it a dead play? Does he make a play through that same play call? How good is he on third down? How good is he in the red zone? How good is he at identifying defensive coverages? Is he consistent in identifying those coverages? There's a lot of second level, if you want to call it second level stuff, that's not necessarily on the surface, to where you have to evaluate that instead of the hard stats, because stats at the end of the day are just numbers, and you have to figure out how exactly the quarterback got those numbers. I remember last year making a prediction for Jalen Hurts and saying that he was going to throw for around, I said he was going to throw around for 26 to 29 touchdowns, I believe. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. So don't sue me if I'm not consistent with my previous prediction. But so I said that he would do that, and he ended up, I think, with like 29 or so total touchdowns instead of passing touchdowns. And then the interceptions were kind of consistent there. I think I said he was going to throw around 9. So I compared what he was going to do to what a guy like Justin Herbert did, and I said, well, while Jalen's not going to be as efficient as Justin Herbert, he's going to make enough plays the way Justin can to where the two of them can stay, to where Jalen Hurts can stay competitive in games as a quarterback and really not just lean on his players to make plays, but him being the intangible leader that he is, to where he has to take the reins at some point and be the reason the team wins instead of being the reason that the team loses. And I think that's another big contributing factor as to the determination of justifying a contract for him. And I was going to make another point. I think we also undervalue what he did at the collegiate level, and I think that also ties into kind of a lesser expectation of him in the NFL. And everyone wants to point towards the fact that, oh, well, he got replaced by Tua for a reason, and this and that and this and that. Well, I think in that SEC, and that SEC title game against Georgia, I think in that title game against Georgia, Jalen Hurts was only 18 or 19 years old. And we want to bring up guys like Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield in the league that are, entering their 4th or 5th years. And well, guess what? Baker's 27 years old and he's trying to fight for a starting quarterback job. Jalen Hurts is only
what's really disrespectful about, I'm not saying that you're
Jalen Hurts is only 23 people. He's only 23 years old.
Well, but when people are bringing up his Alabama days and saying, he ran from Alabama, it's not true, because he did get benched in the championship game and he came back to Alabama because he was going to try to compete with Tua to get a job. He didn't win the job. And he stayed and he was respectful and he was the backup and he helped Tua as much as he possibly could until Tua got hurt the conference championship against Georgia, and then he came in and he won the game for them. If Jalen was not there, then Alabama would have not been in the playoffs because they would have had 2 losses. So,
take of it what you will from a competition standpoint when he goes to a different conference and playing for Oklahoma. But, how often do you see a single quarterback taking 2 different programs to, deepen the playoffs at the collegiate level? It just doesn't happen all that often. And, had it not have been for Joe Burrow,
he was insane.
Had it not have been,
with LSU.
So, had it not have been for Joe Burrow, you can make a case that Jalen Hurts was more than qualified to be a Heisman winner. So, this is coming off stems of watching Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray win it at Oklahoma prior to Jalen arriving.
If Jalen came in the 22 class, he would have been the first quarterback taken. There's not even a question. In my mind,
I don't know how else you can spin it, but we can't. We also can't live in the past with this. Sometimes we like to bring up the collegiate level because of we want to identify the basis to which he started to kind of either validate or invalidate where he is as a quarterback right now. And, we have to understand that he took the reins for a dysfunctional Eagles team when their franchise quarterback completely imploded. And, Doug Peterson was on the outs, still calling the plays and trying to fight for a superiority standpoint amongst 4 different offensive assistants and and everything else you want to throw into the dumpster. So it's not like Jalen Hurts was set up for success from the get-go, and it is only until this year that he is consistently in the same type of offense. And that means everything to a quarterback because they're not relearning different terminology. They're not learning, they're not learning different concepts. They're not learning different styles. So, it's like to
your point about Doug Peterson and like his rookie season, Jalen's rookie season, the huge problem that I had with it was the fact that they kept trying to use Jalen for being a gadget. They try to keep using Jalen like he's Taysom Hill. Jalen was not Taysom Hill. It's disrespectful to Taysom Hill, and I think the way with Carson was playing during that season, I think Jalen, if he was playing earlier in the season instead of let's just play him for 4 games and see what he can do. If you would have played him a couple weeks ago, maybe the Eagles win the division. The division was win by Washington by 7-9. So I definitely think if he got his opportunity, then I think he could have led the team in the playoffs. But it didn't happen.
And better yet, in the midst of that goofiness, they still put Nate Sudfeld out there on the field. It was obvious they were trying to rue the Giants.
They did that. It was actually funny because Jalen was just standing on the sideline and he had the look on his face like what is going on here? And then you
read his lips. He's like, this ain't right.
The New York Giants fans were in shambles over it, and they were saying, Doug Peterson, how can you do this? But you go winning 6 games and you expect us to help you out. Like, man. Maybe if you win 7 games, 8 games, maybe you can be in the playoffs, but you want to blame somebody for thinking. Right. That just shows where the Giants' mentality is. But that is pretty much it, wrapping it up for another great episode for the LinkedIn podcast, ladies and gentlemen. We also want to thank Grizz and all the people that were in the comment section. He says, the hell with the Giants win more than 6 games, you blue bums. I could not agree more with the statement that he just made right there. But Lindy, anything that you want the people to know before we sign off here?
Not necessarily other than touchdown talk is still active as it's still active as it's ever been with the Philly Talk podcast and Philly Mike being the previous guest on episode 16. So episode 17 is available to the next content creator, whether it's Eagles. And I had the idea going forward that maybe episode 20 was going to be episode 20 would be the start of, adding different ones into the mix, whether it's from the division or whoever else has some relevancy to the team right now. Maybe the Panthers because of Hassan Reddick, or Chargers ones because of Kaiser White, and trying, and getting some intel from these people and stuff like that. So if you want to be a part of the experience of Touchdown Talk, if you haven't yet, you can hit me up on Twitter and whatnot. And in terms of content, that's what I'm looking forward to. And no, man, episode 10 is around the corner for LinkedIn. It has it has went by pretty quick
and
already.
Before we sign off, I just want to say for 10th episode, LinkedIn is going to be having a call-in show. So if there's anybody that would like to come on and be on the show with us, then we're going to have the links available for you guys to come and speak your thoughts and opinions about everything. So look out for that in Touchdown Talk. Very interesting with Lindy doing it with different people every single week. It's definitely awesome to see. But ladies and gentlemen, with all of us here with the LinkedIn podcast, with all of us here with the Sideline Sports Network family, we will see you guys next Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, for another episode of the LinkedIn podcast.
Yes.